welcome. I'm Sara. I'm the Access Officer at Mansfield, and I have 10 wonderful student helpers who are going to be answering some of the most frequently asked questions that we get about Mansfield, Oxford, and also the admissions process. So we're going to start with them introducing themselves and then get into the questions.
Hi, I'm Maya. I am a third year and I study English.
Hi, I'm Robin. I'm a second year doing maths.
Hi, I'm Fran. I'm a second year doing geography.
Hi, I'm Tallulah. I'm a first year doing theology.
Hi, I'm Boston. I'm a first year doing law.
Hi, I'm Liam. I'm a first year at MSc.
Hi, I'm Matthew. I'm a third year doing physics.
Hi, I'm Femi. I'm a second year doing material science.
Hiya, I'm Harry and I'm a first year studying history.
Hi, I'm Annabelle and I'm a first year studying human sciences.
Excellent. Okay, well, I think we'll just get started. So the first question is just, what is Mansfield like?
So that Mansfield is just like an incredibly friendly place. Like as soon as I got there, everyone was very welcoming, very friendly.
Mansfield is really great because it's not intimidating at all. Everyone is so welcoming, and I know I was absolutely terrified, even at interviews, to sort of walk into the JCR and it's just all these people and you think they all know each other and they're all friends, but everyone's in the same sort of position and everyone wants to get to know each other. So, and Mansfield is such a great environment for that because you've got all the welfare and it really promotes sort of inclusivity and friendliness.
I'd say Mansfield's great because of the accommodation. Almost all of the rooms have en suites, which is kind of a big deal. Also, they house you for 3 years, so your rent won't change for 3 years, which is really great. And there are some off-site. But other than that, like the facilities and the accommodation is so nice. Benefits, especially, is the kitchens. So like just being able to cook for yourself is a great advantage, and like to not have to rely on hall food, although that hall food at Mansfield is like really, really, really good.
I have this expectation that everyone was going to be white and that like everyone was going to be like quite nerdy and just like stay in a room and like, not speak to anyone. Or be in the library all the time, and then when I got there, I realized that everyone is just pretty much normal, and like you just go in and you think that everyone's just going to be so different to you, and that you're not like meant for that type of environment. I feel like everyone's probably felt like that before coming in, but when you're actually there, like everyone's just vibing with you.
Going off what Femi said as well, just because of the college system, because Oxford is comprised of all these colleges, it's so easy to actually make friends. Because I was so nervous to come into Freshers Week and be in my room and not be forced to go out and see people, which I think one of the benefits of Oxford is definitely that because of the college environment, you're always around people.
Cool. And what's a typical day like? So if you're a scientist versus if you're doing a humanities or a social sciences, that might vary slightly.
There isn't really a typical day, but it's more like a typical week. So you usually have lectures almost every day, but there'd be sort of 3 days where you'd have a lot of lectures, maybe like 3 or 4, and then 2 days where you might have practicals on those days. So that would be from like 10 till 5, and you'd just spend all day in the lab doing lab work. Or in like second year, you'd have 2 days of labs on 1 week and then no labs the next week. The 2-day labs are much better than the 1-day labs. So you've got sort of much more time to do stuff. It's kind of more fun and you get into more detail.
Yeah, and I think bouncing off what Matthew said, the kind of physics, so kind of humanities tend to have fewer contact hours than sciences. So like myself studying history, I probably have 2 or 3 lectures a week, so not a lecture every day, and then about an hour a week of a tutorial. It does vary slightly kind of over the course of the year, but that's fairly typical. So most of my time as a humanities student is spent kind of studying independently. So I spend lots of time around college, in the college library, and in the crypt, which is kind of the kind of communal cafe working space area, which is really cool. And that just gives me a nice bit of flexibility, really, with kind of I can work when I want and when I feel best for me. But that's fairly typical in humanities, is lesser contact hours.
You both talked a bit about tutorials. Do you want to just kind of give us more information about what that would be like?
So they can sort of vary in length, so you get from like an hour to maybe like 2 or 3 at the longer end, depending on like who your tutors are. So some will just go through the sort of questions you've got wrong. So you do a problem sheet, 6 questions, and you do then submit them to your tutor, and they go through them usually on a whiteboard. And you can also, depending on the tutor again, or depending on your preference, you can like write on the whiteboard yourself. You can ask as much as you want to the tutors. So it's very like interactive, like a lecture where it's sort of them just talking at you.
Yeah, definitely echo that. I think kind of in humanities, that kind of interactive element of the shoots kind of still exactly the same. It's a really great opportunity. Kind of, I can't think of many other opportunities you'd get to kind of be 1-on-1, 2-on-1, or usually 3 at the most, on one with like a world leading academic in the field.
Right, and apart from, you know, doing your subject and your work, what other things do you do in your spare time, or just generally kind of for fun?
So I figure skate for the uni and just like for fun on student nights. There's lots of things to do in Oxford. Some people row, some people do sports for the university, some people do sports for college, but there's like so much to do.
Yeah, so I go to a lot of the union talks. My favourite one was probably Theresa May, and I quite like the climate change stuff. There's a lot of debates and stuff like that. I've also done a couple of random things like jazz sock, even though I don't play a jazz instrument at all. I just like watching everyone else play theirs. Just, you know, just go out your comfort zone, do something fun.
One of the things I do outside of my subject is that I go to a lot of Afro-Caribbean society events, and they do a lot of stuff connecting all the years. So like from first year to 4th year, and even like DPhils, people that are doing masters, whatever, they all like lots of them just go to like different things like meet and eat. They do lots of Christmas dinners, well, one Christmas dinner a year, and just a bunch of other stuff, like lots of club nights and nights out. So that there's like a quite large like community, a Black community, and that was one of the things that I wanted to like make sure that I had when coming to Oxford. So yeah, like they just support you a lot when it comes to your subject and not your subject as well. Yeah.
I think Oxford is a great city to live in as a student. It's really nice because it's big enough that there's so much to explore and it feels really lively, but at the same time most of the places you want to get to are in walking distance, and it's not too intimidating because you can get around and you do definitely get to grips with it after not too long. There's also so many great like restaurants, bars, shops, cafes, and the nightlife is decent. It is a good city, but it's funny because the best nights out tend to be on the weekdays rather than the weekend, which is quite funny. But yeah, it's great. And Mansfield's a really good place to explore the city from. It's located really well.
Yeah, I agree with Annabelle. I think Mansfield's in a perfect place because you're not right in the middle of every like the busiest parts of Oxford, but you're at an easy walking distance to all the clubs and bars. And I think another nice thing about Oxford is that there's a really nice amount of pubs and sort of a variety. So if you don't want to go out one evening, but you want to a club, but you want to do something, there's places you can go, and some of them are a bit more expensive, but others are a bit cheaper, and they will do quite nice food and they've got nice atmospheres. So it's a nice place to be, whatever you want to do. But I don't think you really need to be concerned about finding something to do. There's plenty.
Managing your finances at university?
Yeah, I found it surprisingly easy. Like, I remember before I went to uni, I was very like worried about it, and I would spend a lot of time like looking up different grants and bursaries and things. But in the end, I found that I'm from like a low income background, and the university has a really, really good support package, I think, for people from poorer households. So there's this thing called the Crank Start Scholarship, which I'm on, and they give you like a very decent sized bursary, but they also give you a lot of career support and internship support, which I found so helpful. And yeah, with that, and just like also there's college support, so like academic grants to help you buy books and things. So like I've never been in a position where I felt like I was going to run out of money. And even like friends that I've had who have had more difficult or more unpredictable financial situations, like there's always been some kind of level of support available for them, and they've like all been able to manage.
I think one thing that shocked me as well is that Mansfield, in terms of its accommodation, all of the room prices are exactly the same. So it stops any sort of bias where people that can afford to have nicer rooms get nicer rooms. It's a completely fair system, and you only pay for when you're actually in the room, unlike other universities which sometimes charge you all year round. So I think in terms of finance for accommodation, it's actually it works out quite well in Oxford.
And the next section is a bit more about like the application process. So starting off nice and general, kind of what made you want to apply to Oxford, and also why did you choose Oxford over Cambridge?
Actually completely set on Cambridge at one point. I was like, this is definitely where I want to go, this is what I'm doing. And then I went to the unique summer school at Oxford, and I just like fell completely in love with Oxford. So I spent like a week there, and I got to use the libraries, and I got to do a tutorial, and I met all these people who were from state schools like I was, and I was just kind of overwhelmed with how like comfortable and enthusiastic like the atmosphere of the whole university felt, and also just Oxford as a city, it felt so vibrant, and just yeah, I loved like the architecture of it, and that everything is so close and so flat, it's so easy to get around, and so I did this kind of complete 180 where I went from being set on Cambridge to set on Oxford very quickly, and yeah, I've never regretted that decision at all.
Yeah, kind of similar with me. Like, I found that I much preferred having a bigger city, so you don't feel trapped into not that the uni's a trap, but you don't feel confined to the uni. You're part of something bigger. And also, probably my biggest thing was that there's a underground tunnel connecting two of the biggest libraries. Really cool. So you'll get to see that. Lovely.
Obviously, everybody knows it's a pretty good university. I mean, if you can, kind of, why not apply?
And why did you pick your subject?
Yeah, I study human sciences, which is also quite niche and not offered by that many other universities. And I found it by just scrolling through all of the sort of course options, and there are so many little courses. It's really worth looking if you're not like set on something you want to do, or even if you have something in mind. It's really worth just looking at everything that's available to you, and also reading more and more about it. I just kind of knew it was for me. The more I found out, the more I was like, wow, I really want to do that. And I think it's important to research your course so much, because there are always going to be bits that you prefer and bits that you're less keen on, but you need to find a course where you're really, really passionate about it, and you're not just like, oh, I like this, I like the image of this, or this topic looks interesting. Obviously, there's going to be some bits you're not overly keen on, but as a whole, you need to really love your course, especially at Oxford.
And how did you choose a college?
The main thing to look for is whether it actually does your subject, because theology is actually quite a small subject. I thought it would be offered by more. Also, what was quite important to me is having a lot of people doing your subjects. I didn't want to just be the only one or one of two. So I thought there's less people to bounce off. Also, the size of the college. For me, I preferred a smaller environment so you can kind of know everyone. Location, I think Liam talked about this earlier, but Mansfield's actually a really nice location in that it's not right in the centre, but you can walk to Tesco in like 5 minutes. Yeah, and also look at the proximity to your department as well. Also, whether it offers good vegetarian and vegan food, because yeah, I don't really want to eat out, but I also don't want to cook all the time.
Yeah, and I think I definitely kind of on the food thing, I think it's a really interesting point. And I think it's kind of something that set Mansfield apart a little bit for me from a lot of other colleges that I've visited, in that Mansfield, there's kitchens on site that are kind of open access to everyone, that are kind of fully kitted out with like an oven, hobs, pots, pans, fridge, all the works really that you'd expect to find. And that's something that some other colleges do offer, but it's not something you get at every college. So I've got some friends at other colleges who maybe have like tea points, which is more just kind of a room with a kettle and a sink, and a microwave. So having that kind of kitchen space where you could cook, and prepare food is really important for me. And also just on what Tallulah said, really similarly, kind of the size of the college. So I came from a really small sixth form, and so being able to get to know people kind of really well on that individual basis, was really important to me. So that's another reason why I chose Mansfield. And I think lastly for me, Mansfield really stood out because it's got a really high percentage of state school students who get a place, and that kind of looked at and thought, well, there's going to be a lot of people there who are like me, and I think there's kind of the stereotype of what the type of person who goes to Oxford is, and while I absolutely don't, I don't think that's true at any college, I think Mansfield breaks that stereotype down particularly well.
And what was your experience of the application process like, kind of giving us an overview of the various steps?
So firstly, I had to come up with a personal statement, which seemed very daunting at first. So I started just by reading loads around my subject and going beyond what my A-levels would teach me. And I found that really helped me show my passion, also be really sure that I was applying for the right course. And then I had to sit the TSA, which is a test. So I did a few practice papers for that, but it really wasn't too scary in the sense that there were no sort of hidden surprises. It very much was like what you're told it's going to be is what it's going to be. And then luckily I had an offer for interviews, and they were very scary, or at least, yeah, I was absolutely terrified. So I had one at Mansfield and one at St. John's, and there were definitely some surprises in those, but I did feel like the tutors were trying to bring out the best in me and just to see how I think. So it's not really about what you know, it's about how your mind works, are you teachable, sort of thing. But as a whole, I think the application process for Oxford is really holistic in comparison to most other universities, and Mansfield in particular make a real effort to consider the bigger picture relating to sort of the odds people have faced. So it's really good.
And you kind of mentioned personal statement there, which is one of the earlier steps in the process. So what kind of things should people write about in their personal statement?
I think that the main appeal of personal statement, kind of why it's there, is that it gives your tutors a bit of a flavour for kind of who you are and what drives you a bit, because obviously they have your grades and stuff, but they don't know why you like your subject, and to a point what you do outside of your subject, though they're going to be less interested in that. But I'd say try and kind of link the things that you do kind of outside of academia to the subject that you're interested in. So for example, if you are really into cycling and want to apply for engineering or something, you can probably tie that together.
I would add to what both Annabelle and Robin said, like your personal statement is there to show why you love the subject you're applying for and that you're applying for it for a reason. So make sure you include all the things you've done outside of just your school subjects, and then don't just list them as well. It's better to do a few, but then really, really go into detail about what you've learned from them, what you agree with, what you disagree with. And they can be anything. It doesn't just need to be books. It can be like talks you've gone to, work experience, or like summer schools. That's another good thing to mention. And then one last thing that I'd probably say that I heard a lot was that don't focus too much on just like normal extracurriculars like clubs and stuff you've done at school. It's okay to mention them a bit, but if you're going to mention them, focus on more on the transferable skills you've learned from them, rather than just listing like all your hobbies if they're not related. If they are, it's fine to include them, but don't just list things for the sake of them. You want every word to count.
And so then after you've written your personal statement, submitted your UCAS form, lots of subjects require you to sit an admissions test. So if you sat a test, how did you prepare for it?
Yeah, so I did the physics aptitude test, so the PAT, and I feel like I got ahead of the game and I started prepping for it like quite early. So I recommend that maybe like to be safe, like a couple of months beforehand, before like I think it's in October or something when you do it. And then on Physics and Maths Tutor, which is a website that you probably know, like if you do physical sciences, they had all of the past papers plus the answers. So some guy had like written out all the answers to the question. So I just worked through each one and I answered each one.
I think really quite similar experience really. So doing history, I did the HAT, which I think is a brilliant name, stands for History Aptitude Test. So the HAT, in effect, similar to FEMI, kind of find past papers online was a really good thing to do. Just be careful with some of the admissions tests because they do change from kind of, so I remember downloading papers from the HAT from like 2014, 2015 and thinking, well, this is totally different to the papers like that I'll be sitting. So, you know, all the information's on the website. Just make sure that you're using the most up-to-date kind of sample papers, past papers. But I think just a big thing I'd say about kind of the history aptitude test particularly, but also a lot of other tests, is just kind of back yourself a little bit. The history test, obviously looking at past papers, and you can also find the examiner's reports online, which is really useful. But a lot of the skills that are required in the tests are going to be really similar to the skills that you're developing at A level anyway. So the history aptitude test, for example, really is a source-based, analysing a source and then writing an essay on the source. And they were things that I was already doing as part of my A levels. So it's nothing that you can't do or that you're not capable of doing.
And finally, kind of the interview. What was your experience with the interview like?
At first, it kind of seems quite intimidating because it's like these really intelligent tutors who you have no idea who they are, and you're just sat in front of them, and you have to basically do physics. Or well, there's like one physics question, one maths question, sort of like that for physics anyway. But they're like really nice people actually. So the two people who interviewed me are now my tutors, and they're like really great. Looking for the best people, and they're not trying to trip you up or anything.
I can't lie, interviews when you first like walk through the gates of Mansfield, I was very frightened. And actually the first person I met was Femi. We both stood outside. It was in the snow, it was snowing, it was quite scary, wasn't it, Femi? Anyway, the interviews, like, because you're there for a few days, it can seem quite weird because you're with a bunch of other potential applicants and just trying to enjoy the time there as much as you can, because it's a really amazing opportunity to just even have that opportunity. The interview helpers are really, really lovely, and the interview is far more like a tutorial than you think it is. It's more of a conversation than an interrogation, and I definitely got a lot of things wrong, but being open to like being open to feedback is potentially what they're looking for, which is really good. I really thought I'd done rubbish, but you just can't tell really.
And finally, for all those people who are kind of thinking of making an application, obviously movement and resources are quite restricted at the moment. What kind of advice do you have, or any recommendations of things that they can do or read or look into that might help them prepare?
This moment is, don't worry too much about it. It's so easy to see everything you're doing as absolutely crucial, and if you get one thing wrong or start doing the wrong thing, then that's your life ruined forever. But it's okay to not be completely sure what you want to do. It's okay to think you want to do one thing, explore it a bit, and realise that's not for you. I didn't decide I wanted to do maths until about 2 months before my A levels, so I took a year out and applied on that. And I'd say just, if you don't have it all figured out okay now, then that's fine. Just give it some time.
Robin, you stole mine. I also did the same. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I also took a year out. But I suppose on another piece of advice, I think for students in terms of what they can do right now, when you're reading things, just always question, why might that person be saying this? What's their reasoning? What was the social context of this reading? Just sort of, instead of taking things at face value, always questioning why someone said something is quite important, especially if you're doing a humanity.
I would say if you're at all overwhelmed by Oxford, just don't be. Like, don't doubt yourself, just apply. The worst thing that can happen is you lose one of your options. You've got 5 anyway, and Oxford will probably be the highest grade, so you'll probably have lower grades anyway. Just do it, you've got nothing to lose, literally nothing.
My one piece of advice would be to use the university's resources, because not only will they make you stand out in your personal statement to other universities, but it's a really great way of digging into a subject that you're interested in, and there's a lot on the website, and especially on Mansfield website, to use and to find interesting things that you're into to help boost your personal statement in a time like this.
Yeah, I think the advice I would give is take your time, make sure you're happy with what you're doing, but try and be as prepared as you can. Like the more you can do, the more comfortable you'll feel with the process. It is a different process from everywhere else, so the more comfortable you are with the process and yourself, because you know that you've done things and you've got these things to back up your interest, the better you'll feel and the more comfortable you'll feel applying. So it's just finding that balance between not psyching yourself up too much, but making sure you're ready as you can be.
Sort of don't stress about parts of the application process that you've already done. So if you think maybe your application test has gone badly, but you've been given an interview, well, clearly your application test has gone better than you thought it has. And in the same way, if one of your interviews has gone badly, that doesn't mean the next one is going to be badly. In fact, it's like a chance for it to go better. So provided you still got that chance, take it.
I would say like read around your subject as much as you can. So like go above and beyond your A-level syllabus, so that like you can really show that you're like truly interested in your subject. Yeah.
Yeah, I think my advice would probably be quite similar to a few things that have already been said, but just kind of, if you're at all unsure about anything, if you've got questions about the process, about a particular part of the process, just reach out and ask. There's so many different places you can get in touch with people. A lot of the colleges have access accounts on Twitter and Instagram that you can find. I know Mansfield have their Twitter account, for example. You can also always drop the college access officers an email. The university admissions team have emails that you can drop an email to. And there's loads of student societies as well, groups like Target Schools and the First Gen Society, who really do loads of great work and are happy to answer questions that you've got. So just don't stress about asking a question if you feel like you need to.
Yeah, and finally, I'd say the most important thing from my experience would be just embrace the whole process, from the extracurricular reading to spending time in Oxford at interviews, getting to meet people. There's so much to gain from all of it. So try your best not to be scared to get involved. Oxford isn't the be all and end all.
Yeah, that was all really good advice. Thank you all for being willing to take part, and hopefully for students watching, they found that useful, kind of got better insight into what Mansfield is like, and kind of a better sense of what the application process is also like. But yeah, thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.